Gets us into our next series. Looks like we've got a very interesting one here, actually. KJ versus Elyona. These players, I would say, are incredibly closely matched.
Oh yeah, two up-and-coming players that have been around for quite some time. Elyona, of course, one of the better French players, whereas Kaiser Johan, he is representing Sweden over here as we're starting to witness, Sweden becoming a powerhouse of high-level AoE 4 players. Talk about Baltu, Numedan, Kaiser Johan as well. And of course, we have Corvinus living in Sweden as well, not to even mention Dimu. So it's going to be fun looking at him. He is going to have Mongolian Heights picked as his home map. On the other side, Elyona rocking with Gorge, with Rocky Canyon being our first map for the series. Civilizations will have Malians, Delhi, French, and Byzantines for Elyona. On the other side, Abbasids, Chushi, HRE, and Ayyubids available for Kaiser Johan.
Yeah, no priority on Ayyubids or Abbasids from Elyona. I mean, Elyona is a prolific Abbasid spammer historically, so that shows you just how bad that civ is. But Ayyubids beaten to the punchline by KJ here. No surprise. I love that when you understand your opponent that well. Like Elyona, I think at this point Ayyubids is his most played civ of the new civs. So if you get into a matchup, like this is a very interesting strategic choice on a draft. When you're done with the bans, you can treat your first pick like an additional ban. If there's something you know you can play that your opponent desperately wants, yoink it away, right? If you go up against Corvinus, take his down. Now, he's not just Delhi anymore, but like you get that. Like, that's a classic example in people's brain. It's like you can actually get the 1-2 punch value play. So I like the drafting approach there. A little bit deeper in this, it's quite interesting to see HRE and Juji and Abbasids though, because I already highlighted Abbasids as kind of trashed here right now. Guess who else is down there with them, LidaKor? Those other two picks are not looking great right now.
Yeah, Rocky Canyon is going to be our opening map with the Delhi facing off against the HRE here. So that brings us to an interesting discussion, KP, before we head into this game. Because with that, Kaiser Johan is going to have the Abbasids and the Abbasid variant Ayyubids for the remaining two games,
Yeah.
alongside Shushi's Legacy. It's an interesting combination of civs. On the other side, there is more versatility, I feel, with the Malians, the Byzantines, the French. But both of these players have a very promising draft, I feel, and we've got some real powerhouse civilizations that have not been banned for this one.
Yeah, and Elyona really likes French. Like I mentioned, Abbas's French is their other OG pick the most. They spam them, and I know people have been giving French a lot of shtick, but I'm here to say actually they're not that bad. Like they are still a very competent civ, even though everyone thought Jeanne d'Arc was going to take over the entire globe. I don't think that's true. I think the French has a place. The negative is when you're up against the absolute top players, what they realize is French play typically has to be multi-TC. But if you go below that, and I think both these players will happily hold their hands up and say, yeah, we're not top 16 players. That's where the French can still just give you quite the walloping. So a comfort pick and one that should work quite well in this match, especially considering some of the picks that KJ has. I think actually French versus Abbasids, TC booming is feasible there. Juji versus French, also another matchup French can play well. So looking at the way it's been drafted, if I had to just hold my hands up and choose a victor based on drafts, even though I love KJ's opening Ayyubid yoink, everything else about it has me pointing to Elyona. And especially this opening matchup, because a lot of people might remember HRE versus Delhi. There was a time where HRE was the golden solution because you used to spam men at arms up to 14 feudal age, tech up, GG. That's not the case anymore. Ever since the Ghazi Raider introduction, Delhi handled that very well. And it means that you have to get creatively different as the HRE to solve. You can't think fast castle. That doesn't work. You get pinned in. You can't go for mass men at arms. It's too slow. It gets countered. So I'm hoping KJ's got something creative in mind, whether that's some crazy 2TC build or maybe infinite archers for the HRE.
Yeah, now, when you look at the ranked ladder statistics, which is something that we always need to be a little cautious about, but still, it's somewhat indicative of civilization matchups. At the Conqueror level, Delhi actually has one of the lowest win rates against the HRE. So it's going to be interesting indeed to see what Kaiser Johan brings to the table with the HRE, especially when you consider that Rocky Canyon is one of those maps where the players are kind of far away from each other. It's a fairly open map as well, so crossing is often dangerous. And we've seen players using that in a variety of ways, either using trade, which I don't think it's going to happen, but 2TC builds, potential fast castles are legitimate options here, I feel, for the HRE.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that this is Rocky Canyon, not the one you've been playing on the ladders, Rocky River, right? So we're not going to have any fishing ponds to worry about, just a lot of stone slopped in the center of the map. So, that's another interesting detail because it means you can't just try to boom up your eco to inflate, raw meat numbers in the early game. I think that leans in favor of the Delhi for that reason because in this matchup, they're going to be playing pocket resources, right? So they don't have to go for farms. Also puts more pressure on KJ to get a good rotation, securing sheep. I always find these type of matchups really frustrating. Like when you're against a berry civ, they can take more sheep off the map. And a civ like HRE uses more sheep more quickly, right? So they run out of safe resources faster. That's why I'd actually prefer that KJ goes for a double scout opener here. I've noticed a few HRE spammers still do this. A lot have moved away from it. But I think anytime you're up against a berry civ, you're setting yourself up for limited options if you don't open double scout.
While we're waiting for the game to launch over here, folks, we also need to highlight that we have a brand new sponsor for this event. We are welcoming back Surfshark as the primary sponsor alongside Microsoft for the Elite Classic 2. KP, I'm sure you have a couple of thoughts about Surfshark, so why don't you just introduce us to our lovely sponsor here?
I think it's amazing that there's a service that provides you the ability to surf on the back of shark. Wait, that's not what they do. They provide you VPN services, folks. And those are valuable for multiple reasons, actually. You ever wanted to watch a TV show, but you can't in your country? As a Brit, I get that all the time. I think plenty of you know what I'm talking about. Netflix is definitely a lot better when I look across the pond. If I want to actually get access to that, that's where something like Surfshark comes on. Another thing that's pretty interesting, are you sick of just getting queued into that player in your region at a certain level that always stomps you? Why not just change region and possibly matchmake against a different player more quickly? A lot of games actually function that way. In fact, I don't want to kind of tip you off, but there's a lot of other games, especially in the FPS market, where that's actually a surefire way of getting maybe some easier lobbies. Another thing that's really cool here, I know some people mentioning they got ad issues. Well, here's the thing. We need ads to make this channel run. But you can also help us make the channel run through multiple means now. You can either subscribe to the channel, use those primies. I know you've got them. I'm looking at you right now. But here's another interesting idea. Someone actually just highlighted in chat that when they VPN to, I believe it's Bermuda, they did not get ads. How would you VPN to Bermuda, LidaKor?
I'll just use Surfshark, KP, because apparently you can do that.
Well, there you go. Go across to the link now, EGC TV, to get yourself a extra 3 months for free on us.
No, to be honest, KP, the thing that kind of makes me think is how this person came up with Bermuda specifically. Surfshark gives you a million servers to choose from all across the world, and he's like, Germany isn't going to work. No Japan. How about Bermuda? This place probably doesn't have ads, right?
There you go. And you know what? Like, Crackety hit another one that I love. There's a bunch of players right now that bait me. I'm like, oh, this account's from Sweden. It must be Numenor. Turns out it's Wham. Actually, some of them have been doing it right now. You know what? A good way of making sure that when you get into these tournaments, you're a player, that you don't get countered because someone knows all your secret strats in the ladder. All of a sudden, pretend you're a South African player. Maybe you're from Brazil. Maybe you want to be Japanese. And everyone's like, Koinu's back in the game. Pog. No. Turns out it's just you, maybe an upcoming German player, American player, wherever you may be, telling us a little fib about where your account's from. So many creative usages.
All right, we are getting close to game number 1 here, folks. This is, of course, the open qualifiers for the Elite Classic. We have 12 players already qualified to the main event through various forms of pre-qualification things, invites, previous tournament performances, things like that. We have 8 more players qualifying this weekend, with 4 getting there today, and 4 will qualify in tomorrow's open qualifiers. So any player that gets eliminated today, they will get a second chance tomorrow.
Yes. So, a heart doesn't have to be broken. Mr. Munch, for example, we went over his series. He can take notes. He can learn from what he's seen. He can go for tomorrow. Another interesting thing, I mean, I can't believe I'm spinning a positive of getting whooped early on. You're on the sideline sooner. So you're able to sit there and watch other potential opponents for the second qualifier. And you kind of have an extra edge there, right? More time to research your opponents. That's the upside. Less games played, but more games to watch. By the way, another thing, like I'm going to keep, like, I'm giving away all the tips on this stream about VPNs, actually. Like, another one to highlight, I know someone mentioned lag. Interestingly enough, with the way that AoE4 is designed, keep in mind this is an RTS where it's able to facilitate people playing from Australia to Europe, right? And although it's not going to be pitch perfect, it's playable, right? That's an interesting design choice they made with the Age of Empires 4 engine. It means actually using a VPN for whatever reason you need it in Age of Empires 4, some which we listed before, doesn't really hurt you as much as if you were to try and use a VPN, I'd say, in an Apex Legends or Call of Duty, right? Where any sort of extra ping kill your game. So yeah, pretty interesting the amount of different reasons you could need it. And I'm just talking within a gaming setting. There's plenty we already highlighted for other reasons. There's even some websites that can be quite handy you can't access in a particular country. So I don't know. Maybe you're one of those people there. There's a site. I don't know what site it could be. I don't know exactly what you're searching, but for whatever reason, Surfshark can help you get around that. I may have used it to get Adobe cheaper. I can't believe it. Well, I mean, it's not like we're sponsored by Adobe, so I'll admit that. Yeah, I got my hands on something really cheap, LidaKor, just by using Surfshark. Checkmate.
All right. So Elyona versus Kaiser Johan, Rocky Canyon to start with. Again, Daily, a civilization that doesn't perform that well against the HRE as compared to other civilizations. So it's going to be interesting to see what Kaiser Johan brings to the table. On paper, this matchup should be favored towards Elyona. He's supposed to be the higher seeded player, but as you kind of touched on this could easily be a 50-50 set.
Yeah, so like I said, he has to get creative. I think you have to focus around archers and maybe spears. It sounds kind of wild, but like it's going to be different. Like if you take the standard approach of pipe in your mouth and spamming men at arms out of axes, you're going to get slapped. I think there's two approaches that the Delhi have to that. They just scale Ghazi plus archers with Tower of Victory and pew you down, or they go fast castle and easy clap. If you go fast castle yourself as Kaiser Johan, we already know what happens on maps like this. It's very open, it's very exposed. Delhi will take all the sacred sites and they'll block you on any relic gathering with those superior Ghazis. But let's see what KJ's got in mind. I can hear the game beckoning us in. Kaiser Johan, one of our Swedish players, going up against Elyona, our second, third top-ranked French player. Admittedly, the first is quite a bit ahead of him. But, you know, second, third, it's its own little brag, right? Okay. Man, it feels weird to be back on Rocky Canyon. Like, so many players as well. This is another thing to think about, right? Like, we are not playing on Rocky River, the map that has been in matchmaking queue for a while. This might be foreign territory for a few of these players if they haven't had enough time to scrim, but we'll have to see. Kaiser Johan on the HRE, Elyona on the Delhi. And already we're seeing that dart towards the center. Remember, these maps do spawn the majority of their sheep down the center strip of the map.
Indeed. And we kind of touched on this in the pre-game here. HRE, not a civilization that performs very well in this current patch against the Delhi. And on this map, you can get away with some less map control heavy strategies early on. Talk about the 2TC build, talk about the fast castle. So I'm actually curious which direction Kaiser Johan's gonna go. He's playing one scout, so does Elyona, and Elyona started off by sending his scout to the opposing player's side, so he was able to take away quite a few sheep from the side of Kaiser Johan here.
Yeah, I think what happened there, they saw each other, right? Because I think we checked the scout pattern out of Kaiser Johan. Yeah, they saw each other, and funnily enough, he went the same way. That's kind of a negative. Means you miss out on additional sheep. Funnily enough, if Elyona wanted, they could just run up the river now and take the majority of sheep away. I'm a little bit surprised they aren't doing that, because one of the big edges you have when you're playing a civ like the Delhi is you don't need those sheep. Negative for the HRE is you need them more than any other civ because you exhaust your starting ones 40% quicker.
Yeah, nice little base layout here for Elyona, by the way. He's going to have a fairly safe goal tucked away at the back. Berries, nice and close as well. On the other side, though, one of the things I'm noticing here for Kaiser Johan is that his gold is going to be quite open to the left. Both of these deer packs are also very close to each other, so this left-hand side flank that he has is immensely valuable, and I feel like this should be the primary angle of attack for Elyona in Feudal.
Did we have like a change to Rocky Canyon how it spawns, by the way? Like, we used to get double wood cluster, but we've got weird lines of wood on this map, I've noticed as well.
I like it a lot more, to be honest.
Yeah, it almost feels like an interesting strategic choice. Like, imagine you bait a fight on one side of the wood and then attack with archers from the other side. Like, you know, just full ambush type effect. Ark Chapel's going to be on the way, though. I think, like, maybe one negative for HRE is a lack of options that's hurting him. You mentioned that gold being far out. It means that this Arkan is only securing wood, and I mean only. I think he's maybe got the berries in range, but he didn't even punt for the stone, so no multi-TC build from the HRE. if this is a fast castle, I don't like his chances of winning this.
It's an awkward setup, especially because if you are fast castling with the HRE here, one of the things that you're doing is forfeiting map control. And once you forfeit map control, the Delhi player can secure all of these sacred sites. And more importantly, if you don't have any map control, even if you go into Castle Age with Ragni's Cathedral, you won't be able to easily collect relics. So I feel like in this setup, the only way that this could work is a fast castle into Burgrave Palace and then Men-at-Arms. But we've seen that over and over again back in previous tournaments. That play just doesn't work out unless you have an insane source of food. And that's not something that we're going to have for Kaiser Johan here.
I think he's got like, what, 9 sheep, maybe?
It's the getter rate as well, right?
Yeah.
You have a finite amount of villagers, and mass production of men-at-arms on the Burgrave Palace puts a massive strain on your eco. So usually the maps where it works out are maps where either the HRE player has 2 TCs, or he has an insane source of food, like let's say a lot of shorefish.
Yeah, and this is exactly why I was recommending you go for the double scout opener here, right? Like KJ, if you go on double scout opener, you have all the options at your disposal. On top of that, you strip extra safe food away from your opponent. Sure, it's Delhi, sure they have berries, sure they get an extra 100 per patch, but let's say they only get 5 sheep off the map. All of a sudden, they're going to be running out to resources exposed when you're still camping at home. The importance of that cannot be stated enough because it means you don't have to leave troops to defend your base and defend your eco. You can send everything to punish the Delhi. So, yeah, the fact that he opened with just 1 scout, no additional, has me a little bit worried. This horseman opening as well, a little bit dubious. If we check the other side, I imagine Elyona should be dropping a stables. Ghazi will annihilate horsemen.
Yeah, that's the other problem that that Kaiser Johan is facing over here. He is playing the Horsemen. He's going to face Ghazi Raiders. That is something that is massively favoring the Ghazi Raiders. And if Kaiser Johan were to go into Castle Age and play into Knights, for instance, which is something that HRE players often like to do, he's facing the same issues. He's facing a unit that's a soft counter to his Knights, and it's going to be very cost-efficient dealing with them.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if this was like some delayed play onto stone for a TC. You get the Horsemen, secure the deer location, and then boom, Bob's your uncle afterwards. But like, you know it's going to be Ghazi. Like this, so this is one of the things about Delhi. Delhi are incredibly strong, and this is baffling, right? Delhi are very rigid. They don't flex much. They do the same thing game after game. They open stables, they drop blacksmiths, then they typically add in archers or spearmen, but they eventually just keep snowballing feudal. You'd think with that rigidness, that lack of flexibility, I want to say, they'd be very easy to beat, but it shows you just how strong the tools are in their arsenal, that even when you know that info, even when you know exactly what you're up against, you're going to lose to it.
And we're seeing this angle of attack come into play here that we kind of touched on at the beginning of this game. Elyona contesting the gold mine, while at the same time also ensuring that his opponent has no access to all those deer packs.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, because I'm wondering if like there was a strategic idea in mind from KJ. We have seen deer pushing on the rise from high-level players. Like, theoretically, getting 3 horsemen and shoving deer all the way back to your base would give you food flexi. But the Ghazi stops that, right? And even though you just saw KJ drop a second stables, that's not an advantage here. If you check Elyona's base, they should have military efficiency and a scholar garrisoned, which means they will be double pumping, right? So right now, they're not going to fall behind in cavalry count. And as we highlight, those are better than the individual horsemen.
Yeah, double stable player. Feels like a very unorthodox way of playing the HRE. Kind of builds into the idea that you have a decent eco buff at the beginning from the Aachen Chapel, and you're just going to play mass horsemen, leveraging that food income. But at the same time, we are seeing a farm transition already from Kaiser Johan. I'm not sure if this is just a reaction to him not having access to the deer, or his whole concept is built around the fact that he makes an early farm transition, so he's got a consistent food income for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
But for the time being, he's confined into his base, he doesn't have military superiority, he's forced to mix in some spears, just like Elyona. But Elyona is getting very close to that point where he's going to start gathering the sacred sites, or not collecting, but securing the sacred sites. And that's where things will start snowballing in the favor of Elyona, I feel.
Yeah, and here's the thing, right? Like, both of them adding in spears, and yes, you have got a lot of cav. I think fundamentally KJ's idea here is scale cav, intercept sacred sites, defend with spear, which isn't a bad idea. But the issue you're going to run into is we are looking at a tower victory build. So those spearmen that Elyona have are going to trade very efficiently. He could easily guard and then mirror the cav move with his own. And I don't really see a world with that happening where KJ is able to stop Sacred Sites from being captured. He can decap them afterwards by splitting the map. But fundamentally, Delhi are going to get the extra out of this map. And the concerning thing is, as this game goes on, the only thing that KJ is going to be able to keep getting extra of is food from those farms, right? Like, as he chops deeper into this wood line, he's going to lose the buff there. Look at where his gold is. Think about, like, when he moves out to Deer. These things are not going to be buffed by 40%.
And it looks like Elyona tried to push the wood line over here. He is going to turn around for the time being. And Kaiser Johan is now moving out with his cavalry, just holding his base with the spearmen for the time being. He kind of needs to make something happen. We touched on the fact that he cannot forfeit all map control, especially because now all of those Feudal Age upgrades are coming in for Elyona, the upgrades that he's getting for free. So he's going to have an advantage when it comes to the blacksmith upgrades. He's going to have a certain level of advantage when it comes to eco upgrades as well. And I feel like all of these things will start making the life of Kaiser Johan more and more difficult.
Oh, wow. This is really cool as well. Elyona's going for the 1-1-1 build. Meanwhile, KJ is staying on Horseman Spear. So he's basically making a 2/3 Horseman comp. This is interesting in that if KJ can find raids, he gets an edge. But now, if Elyona forces like a staged fight, he's better off because what Elyona is doing is he's shifting from half of his army not being buffed in attack speed to 2/3 being buffed in attack speed. That's a big edge. We've seen what Tower of Victory does in these type of games, and it means that KJ needs to start hitting with these raids ASAP.
Elyona is very heavy on the spearmen. He's got 12 of those out there. Could be a nice angle to attack here for Kaiser Johan, jumping on the Berry Veils. Only 2 spearmen to defend these, and it looks like Kaiser Johan is going to commit against this one. He's going to find a couple of villager picks, only losing 1 or so horsemen to the spears. Nice little raid, and exactly what he needed at this point in the game.
That looked like no textiles either, right? So that's a really good wallop. That's an unfortunate mistake by Elyona. Seeing that your opponent's playing mass horsemen, textiles is always worth getting at that point. Like, if you think that that's going to get 1 villager in a raid, textiles makes it so much more difficult, especially in a game where KJ hadn't even got the melee tech yet, right? So these guys hit for 9 damage each. It's pretty pitiful, but great hit. I think if KJ can do that like twice more, he starts to reach into the driving seat in this game. Elyona is going to try to make it more difficult, though. You just saw those wolves going up on the west side. He's going to start to funnel this map. It means these horsemen should eventually have no way in to the main economy.
This is a big investment, though. These are some very, very long walls as a second wave of horsemen now comes in this time around. They will get propelled by the spears. But I feel like Kaiser Johan should be happy with this. This is a massive investment. Look at the length of that wall, KP.
Yes. The negative is, like, usually walls are so expensive, not because of their wood cost, it's because of the way you have to build them, right, which is villages. That's, I think, a big part of why Delhi always seems so broken is when other people want to wall in, they have to sacrifice gathering. When you want to wall in as the Delhi, you've probably got spears or archers, so just thumbs up and go do it. But look at what KJ is doing. He's buying time, he is losing horsemen, but he is making that men-at-arms switch behind this. This was the traditional way that HRE dealt with the Delhi. The question mark is whether it still has the same punch it once did.
Yeah, it feels like you need overwhelming numbers here, and it's going to take time to build up. Those are extremely expensive units for a feudal age economy, especially when you keep making horsemen as well. Both of those cost a lot of food. You've got 1,000 food per minute for Kaiser Johan. So he either needs to sacrifice horseman production, or he's going to be slow adding men-at-arms. But we're actually seeing a very unique way of playing HRE, a rare way of playing HRE that is full feudal age right now, KP.
Yeah, it's aggro-focused. But by the way, like, do you think players watch moments like this back on the broadcast and they facepalm and feel like they look a bit dumb? Like, the wall that isn't actually complete. I always feel bad for him, right? Because it's not his fault. We have the full picture. He can't see that that wall wasn't completed to the right side. But it must be so infuriating when you watch these backs like, I could have hit that economy like 15 seconds earlier, man. And well, he's going to hit it over here. Outpost is up to protect there. Meanwhile, Clash underneath the TC and KJ moving on the gold. And the army looking a bit scarily big. Keep in mind that KJ has not got his entire cab battalion here. It's mainly just spears up against a lot of archers. Men-at-arms now coming through. He's going to be able to push it back. So it looks like it's going to be a defense successfully by KJ. But the reality of the situation, right, is his army isn't looking good for wear right now. Those men-at-arms numbers aren't big yet. Only 9 of them, and the spear count has been eradicated.
That's the big thing here, and don't forget, Ghazi Raiders do get bonus damage against heavy troops. They are a soft counter to these men-at-arms, and with all the spearmen having been focused down by the archers, there's just nothing that deals with these Ghazi Raiders right now. Army numbers looking neck and neck still on both sides, suffering massive casualties on both sides of the map, actually. But at the end of the day, Elyona still maintains his position right next to this gold mine, whereas Kaiser Johan is being cleaned up with his forces inside the enemy eco.
Yeah, and this is really problematic because you have to think about what's happening to those numbers. Like, we watched those pop numbers at the top, and they just moved down at the same pace, right? That's bad for KJ. That means he's trading like a 1 to 1.5x, right? So that means like Elyona is killing 1.5 resources for every 1 lost. Look at the army value. Kaiser Johan should not be drawing these fights on pop. He should be dominating right now. Elyona's comp is cheap. Therefore, it should die faster. But as we just saw, on both sides of the map, they're dying at an equal pace.
Now, one thing that's important to touch on is that Kaiser Johan has a very well set up food economy. He's got a lot of farms. That's something that he spent a lot of time and resources building up. At the same time, Elyona is starting to deplete those good sources of food for him, specifically the berries, but also hunts will start becoming problematic. So in terms of the consistency for the food economy, there's an edge for Kaiser Johan, and I feel like that's starting to show in the army numbers. He's just a lot more consistent when it comes to the production of these high food cost units.
Yeah, it's like Elyona kind of lost control of the map when that raid came in and he split troops to defend and attack, right? Like, that was such an overly aggressively forced fight. And now the men-at-arms are starting to shine through, right? Like, the other issue, like you highlight, you're going to have to move on the map. Kaiser Johan must be up to, what, I say about 20 farms at this stage? I do think the archers might have made this easier for Kaiser Johan, but credit to him. He weathered the storm, right? Like, Elyona, I'm trying to, like, dissect whether this is more KJ played it right versus Elyona played it a bit wrong. I think it leans a bit more towards Kaiser Johan doing it right. Like, we've seen players try to do this men-arms counter before, and they open with it. That's a mistake. Your economy is not big enough to sustain. But when you're this deep, this many farms in, and you have permanent food, that's when it makes more sense. Like, think about what he done instead. He built horsemen, which cost comparative food, but these horsemen have more roles to fill than men-at-arms.
I feel like the key thing here for Kaiser Johan was that he played for a long game.
Yeah.
He set up the farms that weakened him initially, and we've seen him being confined into his game, into his base for a long, long time. But while doing so, he built up a farming eco that now provides consistency. A farming eco that's extremely difficult to raid. Elyona was never able to touch that. Whereas on the other side, Elyona is still... I'm not even going to finish that sentence, KP. That was a very interesting way to break through a definitely incomplete wall.
It's supposed to get like, okay, the first one is like, you know, if you're watching this, you don't see it. That one you do see. But like, it's interesting you bring up the farms. Like, the way I like to think of this is that for KJ, the win condition is getting farms, right? Getting food. The win condition for Elyona is getting sacred sites, and that is his farm. It's a gold farm. Collectively, how many minutes worth of sacred site controls Elyona had in this 60-minute game?
Very few, especially when you consider that on paper, the sacred site to the left of his base is technically walled off, at least partially, and he hasn't had control over that for I don't know how long.
I mean, he hasn't had control over it long enough that twice now KJ has broken through it with no response. And now with the men-at-arms reaching the base, Burgrave comes behind this. I think we are just a minute away from a GG call. If Delhi cannot win this fight here in Feudal, they have no hope from behind up against Castle Age Burgrave play. What a cool game out, KJ. You know, getting into this, we question this idea whether mass men-at-armsing can work now against the Delhi. It can. It doesn't work the way it used to. It requires a pivot, but KJ found that pivot, and I think he just found the win.
And we talked about this when this game began. When you look at the ranked ladder stats, Delhi actually has one of the lowest win rates against the HRE. You have to take those stats with a bit of a, I guess, skepticism. But still, I think Kaiser Johan has shown how full Feudal Age HRE is able to match up against the Delhi, especially when you're able to play defensive and play for that long Feudal. And that's something that Rocky Canyon has helped him with quite a bit. Defensive game into a snowball once he's got that food eco up. That was his key to the victory here, KP.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting. I think like HRE, We said they're at like a 55 to 60% win rate. Surprisingly enough, in like the recent competitive games I've been seeing, they've just been struggling to find that consistent win rate. But this is exactly how it's meant to be played. It's the surgical way. It's the way it's been figured out well over a year ago, actually, in the Delhi H3 matchup. Glad to see it return. I'm glad to see it still be effective because I think a big frustration for a lot of people has been, what is the answer to Delhi? How do you solve for it? China seems to be failing at the moment. It's not what it once was. HRE apparently can still deliver a China, and I'm not gonna lie, folks. There's a few other ones in there that are quite interesting, like maybe a certain Japanese pick that I'm hoping we'll see more of.
And with that, Kaiser Johan takes the lead in this best of three. Looking at the rest of the draft, we have Gorge coming up, Elyona's own home map selection. And we are about to witness a very classic matchup here, KP. French facing off against the Abbasids.
And interesting enough, Elyona has a very deep understanding of both these civs because I think like they both categorize in like his top 4 most played. Gorge is a very interesting map for it as well. Gorge, the interesting thing about Gorge is you can't just kind of condense TC, slow play it. The lack of resources in your starting location means you have to go out on the flanks and play a little bit of risk. That's where I think French picks, Rus picks, any tempo aggressive civ has proven to be quite effective here. So, I would lean slightly into the French camp. I think we said at the start of this draft that, surprisingly enough, French as a TC booming civ can cozily do what the Abbasids do as well. The problem is that that's in a situation like, the kind of even ground when Abbasids are able to go eco wing. The problem here is because it's French, if you go eco wing, you have no protection to drop a good TC as the Abbasids, right? So I'm expecting KJ to open military wing, and that already, if this is turning into a macro game, feels like a really big edge for the French.
I feel like one of the more underrated strategies that we could see here from either of these players actually could be a trade. Abbasids, obviously trade wing, but also let's not forget the French. I don't think it's going to be a Chamber of Commerce build. That will be kind of unorthodox, but French traders are no joke either. And we've seen players experimenting with trade builds on this map back in the past as well. With the French, you do have early map control, so that sets you up very well to slowly build up a trade, reminiscent of how Mongols would build up a trade when they play with the Silver Tree.
I'm just going to let that one bake for a second. And it's overcooked. It's been burnt. Yeah. I don't think we're going to be seeing a Chamber of Commerce. I love your enthusiasm.
No. There's no way. Like, no one said that, KP. I was about to say, like, Chamber of Commerce, absolutely no way.
No
but
way.
School of Cavalry and then a slow build-up of trade, very possible.
Got you. So no LidaKor Sport. We're just going to go, yeah. So the reason why you go sock over cock here is because if you don't have the School of Cavalry to block the initial TC time of the Abbasids, they just kind of scale too quickly and they'll just get freedom on the map. So yes, I've always said one of the biggest...
It's map control. It's always map control. If you want to build trade, you need to have map control. And if you have knights, you do have at least some level of map control, which sets you up for a good trade.
And this has always been the thing. Like, I don't know how Chamber of Commerce still hasn't been reworked because it is like a bottom 4 landmark in the game. It's so bad. Fundamentally, think about what you're giving up. Like, you can argue you're getting traders for free and you're always getting eco upgrades earlier, so it's better. But the reality is, are you really willing to give up a 20% increased production speed on all stables for the entire game?
Yeah, I feel like the big problem here for the Chamber of Commerce, and that is somewhat the case as well for the English when it comes to their feudal age landmark choices, is that it's not just that one of these landmarks is definitely on the weaker side of things. It's also the fact that the alternative landmark is extremely powerful, and it really doesn't make a lot of sense to just give up on that landmark.
Well, let's see who's going to win. Like, we're about to see a clash between two underrepresented civs. It is genuinely the battle of the garbage can. Elyona versus Kaiser Johan. Not the players being trashed, but definitely the civs. Elyona picks the French. KJ on match point has chosen the Abbasids. After what looked like a draft, which favored Elyona, KJ may have been given the route to get a 2-0. Let's find out if he can do it. Okay, not ready. We'll find out in a second here. Looks like we're just quickly double-checking.
We're being baited by production here.
We are. Like, I am ready, mum spaghetti, for this, though, because, the thing that It's interesting, Gorge. I feel like I don't know about you, but I've seen more games of Gorge than any other maps on the matchmaking rotation. But one thing I always say about Gorge, Gorge is kind of like two maps in one. There's two types of games on Gorge LidaKor. There are those with no walls, and those with all the walls. There is
Oh,
literally no
certainly.
in between.
And if we have a lot of walls, then it is going to be very possibly a trade game. With low walls, it's unlikely. But this is going to be an interesting matchup, KP, because I feel like historically we've seen good success in this matchup for both of these civilizations. But recently, this, on paper at least, is an Abbasid favored matchup.
Yeah.
Let's see if we are going to have a 2-0 here for Kaiser Johan, or if Elyona is able to take this to game number 3.
Yeah, and the interesting thing in this is, like you said, that it's favoring the Abbasids. Keep in mind, like, the biggest statistical database we have to work with there is, like, the pre-Sultan's Ascent patch, right? Where Abbasids were really competitive. But weirdly enough, they've fallen off the last few months, and most players still feel like they actually need a buff. So, big question mark on what they can do. For the third time, and this time, the final time, possibly, we are ready to go. Elyona versus Kaiser Johan, game number 2. It's the battle of the trash can. French versus Abbasids. Who is less garbage?
Spawning in on the right side, it's Kaiser Johan with a 1-0 lead in command of the Abbasids in yellow. And to the southwest, it's Elyona playing as the French in blue. Of course, Gorge, a predictable map in many ways, KP. You have well-defined spawns for your woodlines, well-defined spawns for the sacred sites as well as those little ridges in the middle area. So when it comes to planning for this map, you have a lot better idea of what to expect from the random map script than in the case of some other maps.
Almost. There's one exception to that rule. Can we do a Control-Shift-A to sheep count right now? Because there's an awkward sticking point about Gorge at the moment. I agree with everything you said there. There's just one resource that doesn't agree, and that's sheep. The sheep spawns on this map right now are only predictable in one fashion. If you're Kaiser Johan and you went around the map like that and you've only got 3 sheep, you already know you got screwed. One side of this map tends to spawn about 60 to 70% of the sheep on the map, and the other side gets next to nothing.
Yeah, Kaiser Johan feels a little scammed in here, but in the end, he's going to have a reasonable haul of sheep. Luckily for him, he's playing as the Abbasids, so sheep won't really be his primary source of food. He's going to focus on the berries, of course. But still, as we often discuss in these matchups, being able to take away sheep from the enemy, especially when your enemy is playing a food-heavy civilization like the French, is always an advantage.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I like Elyona's full rotation here, though. He has to kind of come back because he's going to run out of sheep otherwise. But if you check the map, he went 2/3 of the distance on the right side, then turned. The best rotation I've seen for a scout on the opener on this map so far, I actually think is what Louis does. Louis, basically, he kind of does a circle, or an oval, I guess you could call it, around the sacred sites. So he darts out of his base, he goes to the left sacred site, then he rotates around the front of the enemy base, and then across to the right side sacred site. That's a pretty nice one, actually. Like, with that type of rotation, you can get like 8 or 9 sheep straight away. And then, if you see your opponent scouting left side, you know you can full scout right. If you don't see them, you know they're already on the right side, and you just dart back to cover the left. It's an interesting middle ground so that you don't get screwed over. And funnily enough, actually, because KJ didn't go the full distance, it's like Elyona... Oh, sorry, Elyona didn't go the full distance. KJ is doing a lot better than we originally expected here.
Yeah, School of Cavalry versus Economy Wings, so no surprise on either side for the time being. And this is where we have to look at a potential second town center spot for the Abbasid dynasty. If they do not play trade, which is quite likely in this setup, they must be playing into 2 town centers, but the stone, it's kind of far away from the starting TC, and I don't see a single villager right there on the minimap for Kaiser Johan. So I feel like he needs to be cautious here, because oftentimes what you will see in this setup is that by the time you start mining your stone, the enemy is going to have knights around ready to harass you.
Yeah, so he's already in the lumber camps. This should be a Rax immediate opener. Anything else, then it just doesn't make sense. Like, you've got an Eco Wing, you need to go multi-TC. I always say if you're going Eco Wing, you at least need to go 3 TCs. Otherwise, it's bad. So this is kind of a rough one in that regard. Skull Carry opening is on the forward spawn. Gold is retracted behind. We're not expecting any counter-offensive. What I'm looking at right now is where the resources are allocated. You need something to secure this front at the base because it's not just the stone, it's also the deer and the berries. Like everything that Kaiser Johan needs as a Basses in this game is forward of his TC.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like one of the big things here for Elyona is that he himself can match the TC production. In fact, do a better job when it comes to mass-producing villagers if he just matches the TC count of Kaiser Johan. So if we see a more defensive-focused game here from either player, we could easily enter a TC race here.
And we talked about this. The idea of a TC race, I don't think is one that the French hate. Like, I actually think ever since Guildhall became meta, I kind of like the TC boom race against the Basses because you set yourself up very comfortably to go imp off of Guildhall alone. And that's a huge edge. So, yeah, it's kind of weird. I think we said this at the start of the draft, is like, Jeanne d'Arc feels better in every regard except TC booming. And the negative of picking French is it does kind of make you obvious in that, like, if you're picking French instead of Jeanne, you're probably just TC booming, right? But in a matchup like this, where it's eco wing against you, doesn't feel like that's a disadvantage.
Yeah, for the time being, Knights are roaming the map. No villager on stone for Kaiser Johan right now. So for the time being, he's going to play an ultra-defensive game, just Spearman confined into his own base, but he's chopping a lot of wood here. So eventually, once he's got a couple of Spearmen to defend that stone mine with, we might see him move towards the stone. On the other side, though, Elyona is already on the stone. So when it comes to this aforementioned TC race, there seems to be a distinctive advantage here for Elyona.
Yeah, the only downside is that Elyona has to shift north side for the resources they want for TCs, but that's like a small detail, right? Like, to me, it just... I don't know, man. This is why I'm always on the side and always a fan of military wing, right? Like, I think 65% of games with Abasses right now features military wing, and it's for a good reason. It lets you harass your opponent, they can have their own TC blocked, and also secures your own TC safely. You know, I guess the logic for Kaiser Johan, he doesn't think a fast castle timing off of 2 TCs is good enough here. He thinks like 4 TC makes a lot more sense, but you're seeing the negative right here. You don't have enough spears to defend against a double knight opener right now, and it means that you're idling up on the stone. Your timing already feels off.
Yeah, Spearman defending this position, 4 of them out there. Good job by Elyona with all that knight micro. Spearman actually in stand ground mode just to make sure they don't chase and then get accidentally picked off as they are unable to brace. But this is something that Elyona is more than happy with. Kaiser Johan is still in the process of gathering the stone for the second TC, whereas Elyona is already building that, also securing that deer pack to the left of his base. No more villagers on stone, so Elyona is done building town centers. We're gonna have to see if Kaiser Johan doubles down on this and goes for a third TC. He hasn't actually scouted the stone mining operations from Elyona, but I think given the fact that he sees only 2 knights and no archers, he should know that Elyona is focusing on town centers.
Dude, I actually love this from Elyona. It's small details that make the difference when you're TC racing like this. KJ already set up a bunch of spears in stand ground on the mine. That's really important because otherwise you can bait them out of position and then cycle charge them. But what that meant is that he wasn't actually guarding his wood line. So what does Elyona do? Without adding any additional knights in, only on 2 still, he runs for the wood line, and look at what KJ's reaction was. 2 more spearmen added in. At this point, he has spent 640 resources on spears, compared to 480 on knights. Wow. So fresh food stuff coming in. Dude, he's going more spears, and yeah, this is because he needs to go free TC, right? So the issue is if you don't go more spears, and you now go for an extra TC, say, on the right side on the berries, you're not going to have enough spears to defend against double knight. And the best thing is that Elyona, because they stopped at 2 TC, they're going to be ready to block that third TC with archers.
Yeah, there is going to be a third TC, but as you said, Elyona is now doubling down on the army production. And this is why it's so problematic that Kaiser Johan has these town centers delayed. His eco buildup is just now beginning. He actually has to get rid of a 7 villager deficit. And while he's focusing on that eco buildup, his opponent is already leveraging that eco advantage that he has. He's going to start escalating his army count. And I feel like he's going to have a very nice timing here where Kaiser Johan isn't ready to fight yet.
Yeah, it's like unfortunate because Elyona kept the door open in more than one way, right? You either go from 2TC into full feudal, or you go Castle Age. And I think either build would have worked quite nicely here, but it's because of the spread of the resources and where that TC got dropped. Like, this is always a negative when you have to drop the TC on the stone. It makes it obvious you're going for triple TC, right? So now Elyona is just spreading out, looking for a target, and you know what the sad reality of this spawn is for KJ? No food spawned on the north side, so his third TC is very predictable. It has to be in this area, so if Elyona just runs a bunch of archers over onto the right side, KJ is going to struggle to get it.
There is more to this, KP. Elyona just checked the gold mine and he saw 0 villagers on the gold. That's a clear indication that Kaiser Johan is nowhere close to Castle Edge. And of course, he could still just be heavy on the army on feudal, but oftentimes what you see the Abbasid players do is try to get to Castle Edge here, try to get those premium units out on the field. So Elyona is very much aware of the timings that Kaiser Johan has right now. Knows that he doesn't really have a lot of blacksmith upgrades because of the lack of gold. Nowhere near close to Castle Age is his opponent. And he himself has a respectable army lead. The numbers are even, but when you look at the army quality and composition, it's a night and day difference between the two.
Yeah, the interesting part to me is that Elyona prioritized Undermesh over Steeled Arrow. I guess he didn't want to reel the archers too soon, and he wanted the ability to dive, because there's no archers coming for KJ, and there shouldn't be. Flash is going to come in, though, and the Revelation is bad for KJ. Initial hit hurts him on the Horseman. Now he sees these Spearmen have been solved for. Love the fact that Elyona is doing this. This is sick, actually. I've noticed a few players have started doing this with the French, the 1-1-1 build. It would seem like a negative against the Abbasids, and normally it would be. But there's one problem with that, LidaKor. KJ didn't do a normal Abbasid build. He didn't do the military wing. No boot camp, so no upper side for you in a 1-1-1 build.
There is more to this. When you look at those spears, you have to keep in mind that those spears are one of the highest upside units in either armies. Every hit that they deliver on an enemy cavalry unit is an insane amount of damage output for feudal age combat. So for Elyona, two things can happen. He's either stabbing enemy spears with spears, which is even-ish. Even if the opponent had boot camp, it would be an even-ish fight, although definitely favored towards the Abbasids. But every time he hits an enemy horseman with one of those spears, it's massive value. So for him, mixing in spears, as long as the enemy doesn't have archers, he simply cannot go wrong with that.
The other thing that's really nice about adding spears in when you're up against spears, and you have cav of your own, is that it allows you to bait the spearmen into charging so they don't break against cav. It's quite interesting because I've seen quite a few players do this at the highest level now, where if you bring in a few spears and they start the melee fight, the enemy spears can't brace because they're too busy attacking. So it means that your knights can then get a free cycle charge off, or they can run by for a squishy target. In this case, it's a cycle charge, and that cycle charge packs quite the punch. Love this now from Elyona as well. Look at that, adding in the Rams already. He's trying to force Kaiser Johan to come out before he has a critical mass of units to fight.
That's a critical TC as well for Kaiser Johan. He has essentially all of his available food underneath that town center. As I'm saying that he just depleted the berries, but still, losing this position, it would be catastrophic for him, and you really have to look at that food eco for Kaiser Johan. He's done with the berries. I think he has a new berry patch he's just now started taking on the right side, but I think he's low on sheep. And now his secondary TC here is going to get contested.
Yeah, now he did drop the third on the tree line, but like that didn't secure more food. And the problem with that is that KJ is going mass horsemen, mass spears. That's all food, a little bit of wood.
Yep.
So it's very difficult to keep scaling. Meanwhile, for Elyona, what does he use? Uses some meat from the deer to go into knights, and the rest goes into archers. And if there's one thing you have easy access to on this map, it's wood.
Phalanx in now for Kaiser Johan, or it's going to be in a couple of seconds. Problem is that these spears will evaporate in an instant once they encounter those 25 archers.
TC down. KJ can't extend his lead. 2TC versus 2TC again. Horsemen trying to cut reinforcements, but they're not going to find easy targets. Knights, you better run back towards the main line quick enough here. In fact, if you just get one or two charges off, it's going to be too painful. KJ, quick on the reaction though. The problem is there's still all these archers now. The problem with what's just happened here is because KJ tried to get cute with the horsemen, Knights are mirroring him, and it means the archers and spears can clean up the rest of the army, which is literally just spears.
Yeah, splitting off forces here is a better deal for Elyona. His archers and spears will escort the rams and annihilate whatever Kaiser Johan has defending his base. Whereas the horsemen will just get chased away by the knights, as you kind of touched on that. And now the gold mine is going to get contested. Chivalry just finished for Elyona, so now he's going to have the knights heal themselves. And with these horsemen being pushed all the way to the north, reinforcements also aren't being intercepted at this point.
No, and they're trickling across the right side for a stage push in, because this is what is so smartly understood by Elyona. Where are you getting food? There's only one place left on the map, right? It's the deer and the berries behind the wall. And guess what? Rams, they get a lot more damage up against walls, so breaking that is going to take him no time whatsoever. Funnily enough, he's leaning towards the main base, and funnily enough, KJ was feeling a bit ambitious there. He was getting ready to ride through with the horsemen. Glad he didn't. I think that would have actually been a death sentence.
Critical push coming in here with the Rams trying to target the tower. A lot of troops here for Kaiser Johan, but the composition isn't super convincing. He doesn't really have a lot of archers to focus down the enemy spears with, which kind of holds all of his horsemen as hostages right now.
Yeah, that was a little bit of a misclick towards the end, a bit of a waste of a few knives, but he's still got enough spearmen in return to make it kind of a close to even exchange. On top of that, he's now starting to get into the production. This is interesting. If you camp here, archers coming out are just going to insta-die, so it's going to force KJ to fight sooner rather than later. Knights do blunt in, but they need to actually mirror the horsemen. Backstab coming through, one of the archer mass. And Elyona has pinched himself against the building. Spear's going to flood on through. If there's one way KJ can win a fight, it's like this. Elyona may have overextended. Too many cav units from the backside. KJ is going to lose a lot in return, but he will survive.
Beautiful wrap here, and really a critical fight. The numbers were there, but you needed to find a way to eliminate these archers to open up the playing field for all these Abbasid spears. Elyona, he moved in, and he got surrounded by Kaiser Johan's troops. Beautiful fight for Kaiser Johan. He lives to see another day, and now, when you look at the overall populations, the eco numbers and the army numbers, it's all neck and neck. Elyona had most of his forces cleaned up in the enemy base, and suddenly, Kaiser Johan is looking more alive than ever.
You know, I think this came down to two missed micros by Elyona. First, on the mining camp, when the Knights got baited into the spears. At least it didn't look too bad because he killed enough spears in return. Still, those are losses that should be happening. Then in that second engagement on the archery ranges, he A-clicks into the spears. There's another two Knights, and that's the moment KJ is able to pounce, because all of a sudden you've got 19 horsemen charging in with, what, 6 Knights to defend that? Just a great read, a great time by KG, but realistically, it's an avoidable mistake by Elyona. You know, it's hard in the moment, but had he actually just kept those Knights back, had he kept them as meat machines there, that camp would have paid off. Add in the fact that he didn't rally his new troops to the army, there was actually about 10 plus troops on this tier stack, and that's why that looks so dominant for KJ. Now, all of a sudden, they're neck and neck on eco, but they're not going to be neck and neck on age. KJ has farms set up to the north side. He's got late game economy, and he's ready to go there. Castle Age is queued up, and it is going to be that military win.
Yeah, one of the most unique, not necessarily unique, but definitely one of the more relevant things when you consider French gameplay is that they often delay their Castle Age. And they do that because the Knights are extremely expensive, especially when you consider the food cost. So Elyona simply doesn't have the resources to age up to Castle Age with. Granted, these Knights are premium feudal age units, and they can hold their own against Castle Age troops as well. Bigger concern for him is going to be the fact that he's facing quite a few archers and spears, and those will be Castle Age troops very soon.
Walls going up to make sure those farms are going to be safe, and Elyona might sense what's happening here, but unfortunately against mass spears and archers and a choke point, going in isn't an option. Love this detail from KJ, adding in camel archers for the unease. Elyona's only play back into this game now is to mass Knights. That 20% unease damage reduction is going to make this impossible to breach. It's such a sick read, and adding the fact military wing is going to enable him to get his hands on boot camp and composite bows, this game is practically over. Elyona's going to be forced to throw into a fight that he's going to struggle to win. In fact, can we check the Golden Age? I think Tier 2, yeah, it just got activated. So the research unlock speed for KJ on these veteran seeds is going to be even quicker.
Yeah, Elyona looking to force a fight over here. He's nowhere close to Castle Age himself. Numbers are looking fairly close. Army value technically on the side of Elyona, but don't forget these Knights will be debuffed by the Camel Archers. And in these narrow choke points, Spearmen with the Phalanx upgrade are devastating.
And you can see Elyona's trying to fish. He has to go in. He knows that no Rams to try and shut down production behind as the clash comes in. Spearmen are pulled forward by the Knights, so archers are targeting them down, but I just don't think there's enough left in the chamber here. Elyona, half the Knights left over, plenty of spears to buffer him away. The camel on ease, ruining his day, and the camel riders are going to guarantee there's no French cavalry at the tail end of this. Looks like KJ is going to hold, and from here, what really is your route to recovery? Elyona could try for a tech up, but now they're going to be a mile behind.
I feel like he's throwing away his whole army over here. So even if he gets the Castle Age, he just has no troops left to work with. Army number is still neck and neck, but I feel like if he wants to have a chance in this game, he needs to pull back right now and hope that he can drag this game out and somehow build up a bit of an advantage. Royal Institute is going to be on the way. He wants to play into the fully upgraded Royal Knights, so it's vital for him to keep these 10 Knights alive. And luckily for him, Kaiser Johan continues to play very defensive, and he's not moving out to punish this retreating army.
Yeah, unluckily for him, those camel archers kind of mitigate the advantage of Royal Institute in a lot of ways, right? Cantled saddles all of a sudden is a +8 damage, not a +10. All your extra health doesn't go as long because you're not putting out as much damage in return anymore. It's just a smart read by KJ. And you know, this is like kind of what I expected out of Kaiser Johan. I doubted his approach because I think, you know, no offense to Elyona, but if you like perfectly execute the approach he took, it should be quite a clean win for the French because he had such a great early game. But KJ loves this defensive style, right? Like people who are used to watching those high-level turtle pros, KJ's one of the upcomers that thrives on that. I think he actually gets off on it. He absolutely loves the idea of hour-long games with meat grinders. And I think that's exactly what he was aiming for here. Now that we're reaching the castle for both, that's where he's going to be feeling most comfortable. Now, with this veterancy advantage, he looks to make Elyona uncomfortable.
Elyona has gotten veterancy on the Knights, and he's now getting it on the Spears, but no veterancy on those Archers just yet. Uh-oh. Nice little raid here by Elyona, and he's been active killing Wills. Also, I feel like Kaiser Johan may have missed some villager production. He's now down by 20 eco, but he still has the army advantage over here. Needs to be careful, though, because you don't have a lot of spears here guarding these archers against all these knights.
What? Dude, the crossbows are frontlining right now. That's terrible. Oh my god,
oh my
KJ!
Lord. 5 spears only on the map.
Well, he's trading archers for archers right now, but like you shouldn't be in that situation. That's the type of poor move someone an age behind does. That was an overextension. KJ, he wanted to punish his opponent trying for a late peck-up, but the timing was off here. That's crazy. Elyona, all of a sudden with a 20 eco lead, and remember now with it being 2TC on 2TC and him being French, that's going to scale faster for him. The only upside is, although KJ has taken a big hit, what I need people to be conscious of is that this was an eco wing. Can we check the House of Wisdom quickly? I want to see if he's actually got the extra eco wing upgrades. Not yet. He's got a lot of farms. He needs to pump agriculture here. 15% increased gathering speed is a big deal at this stage of the game, especially with mass farms behind it.
Elyona, he's been more active chasing these retreating troops as well. Kaiser Johan was a little hesitant to chase his opponent in the fight that he took inside his base right afterwards. But Elyona, he chased Kaiser Johan all the way back into his base, picked off a lot of archers while doing so. Now he himself is going to retreat, but he managed to regroup, and as much as his army numbers are slightly lower compared to Kaiser Johan's, the quality is there. He's got 13 knights, a much higher army value, almost double of what Kaiser Johan has. Now he's starting to mix in some arbaletier, something that's going to dominate these fights against the crossbows. Interesting choice, by the way, because he's only facing 8 Gulam.
Yeah, so the interesting part about that is actually it's not bad against the composite bows, because if you Pavis, you get all the extra ranged armor, which basically offsets half the damage from archer units, and it also gets you extra range. So it's pretty standard. I think like actually right now in the French arsenal, as the game goes on, arbaletier are by far the strongest unit in their entire toolset. So not the worst of ideas. The negative about this is the more you lean into ranged units, the more likely it is that KJ is just going to build some siege in the field. And well, after the recent buff to siege, let's just say mangonels are kind of out of control.
All those Royal Institute upgrades now coming into play. Gambit Zones on the way, Candled Settles on the way as well for Elyona. He already has gotten Royal Bloodlines, so he is going to have an extremely powerful army right now. Fully upgraded knights essentially for Castle Age standards. Arbaletier, of course, being able to hold their ground, deploying their Pavise, and Kaiser Johan's got a slow-moving army here. I feel like if he takes a bad fight, he's going to get cleaned up entirely.
You mean like this one?
Yep.
Yeah, this would do it. There's more knights than there are spears, and those are raw bloodline knights. That is a terrible fight for KJ to be taking. Has military mass on his side, but I don't know if that's not going to last long here. Archer's coming in, arbaletier from the backside, cutting this all down. And all of a sudden, KJ now behind in military. Terrible fight to take. We've still got several knights left at the tail end of the engagement. And once again, it's going to be KJ pushed back.
No Pavisa deployed by the Arbaletria though, so they get picked apart by these archers. And Elyona doesn't have veterancy on his own archers as well. He is still going to clean this up, but this fight could have been substantially more one-sided in his direction. He is now going to face an opponent collecting relics. Still, now he's got a lot of map control and 42 army against 19. The cleanup that we expected, it exactly worked out as we expected it, KP.
Yeah, and let's see if he's doing the expected thing with Bastards. Have we still not got agriculture? I think we still haven't. Like, you can't keep throwing meat away like... Okay, he has. There we go. Like, his number's good, but it's not good enough yet, right? We're not at true late game economy. We're not at meat grinder levels. And that's kind of concerning because the way Bastards outplay French now, it's quality versus quantity. But here's the problem, LidaKor. If it's quality versus quantity and you're behind on quantity, my cue is, yeah, what are you heading?
Yeah, Elyona is ready for a castle drop. He has collected stone very aggressively. He's actually floating 2,000 gold as well in the meantime. I'm not sure if I like this though from him. He's diving the enemy base. He could just drop a castle right in front. But instead, he feels like there's blood in the water. He's facing some mangonels though. Has to be very cautious because that's how Kaiser Johan stick it back into this game. Some good mangonel shots on these infantry troops.
He did leak into the economy though, right? A few knights are in there. That's going to hemorrhage the eco. That's going to idle up the farms. And also right now, KJ is distracted. Even villagers are rushing out to attack for some reason. Okay, this is the worst way to fight. KJ, great defending, but I think what we're seeing fundamentally throughout this game is every time he tries to attack, he's confused. It's like he spent his entire life getting punched, and for the first time ever, he's been told to throw one, and he doesn't know how to. Like, it's so brutal to watch. Every time he goes out of his base, he loses a fight. I don't know why he's essentially playing himself up against the wall here, right? Like, I get the imminence. You don't want Red Palace. You don't want French Age. But the reality is, because your opponent went for the Institute, they kind of already are in Imperial Age. All you need to do is out-survive them.
Exactly, and he needs to play a long game now. He needs to take this to Imperial to get rid of this stack advantage, and this is a villager pull here by Elyona. He isn't messing around dropping a castle in front of the enemy base. He wants to drop it on that primary gold and stone deposit to the north. Kaiser Johan might be able to contest this, though. He does have the numbers. Not so much the quality, but this is not the entirety of Elyona's army here.
This is actually very dangerous because if he gets another keep after that, it blocks out the big gold, the big stone, and literally KJ won't be able to play the game. Like, dude, I'm not gonna lie, the spawn that we've seen in this game is absurd. All of the gold and stone to the north side, all the food to the south side. Some people right now are like, that sounds like a bastard efficiency. No, that sounds like a perfect target for raid, and that's exactly what we've seen in this game, early game, and that might be the defining point at the end of the game.
Yeah, Keep is going to complete over here, denying this stone deposit, the gold as well. And quite a few farms are also being taken out here, / denied by Elyona. Kaiser Johan pulling a lot of villas, and that is a red palace on the way. I think it's very defensively positioned back at home.
Sacred site maybe? Typically you drop these on sacred sites.
We should see it on the minimap.
Yeah, like look at the bottom side. There's like some. Okay, it's over there.
It's back at home.
Yeah. So yeah, he's treating this like a keep to defend his eco. I don't think that's necessary. Like, I get why he's doing it. If KJ does reach a late game, it's gonna be mass horsemen constantly, right? Like that's what the Ambassadors do so well with the extra eco food. But to be real with you, I would be shocked if KJ gets to Imperial Age.
Yeah, the problem with the Abbasids is that you have to wait a finite or a well-defined amount of time to get to the next stage. You cannot accelerate your progress towards the next stage. So when you play from a tech disadvantage, when you are being pushed already, and you have to wait quite some time to get into Imperial, that's a very, very bad deal. Elyona now getting all the elite upgrades as well for himself. Kaiser Johan, he tried to dig some trenches across the map here, and he wants to get into Imperial, but he doesn't have a lot of mobility. Knights are about to contest his eco, and I feel like he could get caught off guard over here by a much superior army.
He doesn't have much gold left. Like he's gonna go Imperial and do what? Trade food and wood for 10 gold to 100? Like, oh no, trade wing. I definitely believe we're gonna be able to trade in this game. I love that, like, in fairness, he has got the southern trade post, right? But like, theoretically, Elyona should be able to cut that off. So you need to win a fight. KJ does have the military lead right now. He's pushing out. One thing that's deceptive about this military lead I can't think of a worse melee-heavy infantry unit to build against Arbitrier. Gambesons is so good against Ghoulam because they're double strike, basically double effective for Gambeson, right? So it's really tough for you to actually win that matchup anyway because crossbows are meant to counter you. It's even worse against the French.
Yeah, Springolds are out there for Elyona. He's got something to deal with those Mangonels, and once the Mangonels are gone, Arbaletier would just annihilate all those Ghoulam Knights, at the same time picking up villagers from Kaiser Johan. He has lost almost 40 villagers now at this point, and it looks like Kaiser Johan is going to have to head all the way back home. Still 50 seconds to go for the trade wing, but he's being raided. And I feel like with that retreat, he is just going to forfeit all the map control here for Elyona. In fact, he's very much struggling dealing with these knights. His farming geek was being ravaged here.
Yeah, he's being destroyed on the backside. He just didn't react yet. This is like one of those moments in a story where someone's like, and we will go to their lands! We will slay their armies! We will pillage their villages! And then like, everyone's cheering like, yeah, let's go get him! And then they turn around and see how big and scary the army is. Like, let's just go home. It's all good, guys. There's nothing to see here. The moment he saw that red palace, it was an instant note. And now, he got nothing. He's literally just a mile behind. Arbitrary did drop the Pavis this time, which means they're going to brutalize this fight. They also do have crossbow stirrups, and guess what? Incinerar Arrows is just the cherry on top. I think even with the tech up complete, KJ now without gold has no realistic way of playing this game.
Yeah, those Arbaletier got banked up. There was a beautiful Mangonel hit from Kaiser Johan, so part of the reason why he's actually able to slowly clean this up is because a lot of those Arbaletier have been heavily damaged. But this is just an even-ish trade that Elyona is more than happy with, because while this is happening, he still keeps killing villagers on the opposing side. Breach to the north allows him to flood knights over and over again into the enemy base. And he has now 54 villager kills to his name, compared to just 13 from Kaiser Johan.
And we're about to see the get the duck out of my gameplay. Like, he's queued up so many knights. This is the moment where you're like, okay, I've had enough of you. Right? Like, the farm's been disrupted, the food income is not great. Kaiser Johan is still building archers. Yeah, I think that says everything he needs to. GG comes out, Elyona pulls it back. We are going to get a third game.
What a comeback. This looked very promising for Kaiser Johan once that initial push into his base got cleaned up. And then, I guess, we need to look back at what happened afterwards. I think Kaiser Johan was a little cautious chasing the enemy army. And Elyona was able to get away with a decent amount of knights and archers, something that he could then upgrade to costly age troops, and then buy some time for him to really leverage that economy that he built up. And of course, when you look at the villager graph, for quite some time this was neck and neck, but once you start looking at Castle Age and beyond, Elyona started to build up a distinctive advantage that eventually snowballed into a game victory.
Yeah, like it's interesting as well because I think this game was quite back and forth. I mean, you can kind of see it on the graphs a little bit. Elyona kind of had this game in the palm of their hands at a very early point, but just a few little misclicks against what is a prolific turtler, almost lost in the game. I think Kaiser Johan though, dude, it's crazy. Genuinely, the map spawn not great for him, just a given. But you know, map spawns is only part of the battle, right? It's how you play it. And the thing is, like for all the great things KJ done when he defended, every time he had to attack, game bad. So here's an interesting thought for you, LidaKor. Game 1 was the same, if you think about it. Game 1 was defined by Elyona headbutting a wall and just getting a little bit too much concussion, right? Game 2 was kind of the same, but the difference is that Elyona left himself with some runway. So now we head into Game 3. And Elyona had Byzantines or Malians. I think Byzantines would have had a bigger ceiling here, but Malians are no pushover if they have to turtle as well. So I think this is the difference now, is that to me, Elyona has sniffed his opponent. He's smelt the fromage, the cheese that he is, which is a filthy little turtle boy. And now, going to this third game, he has cozy picks. Either Byzantines will get that late game, or you pick Malians, you chill for 10 minutes, and then we know what happens after that, right? Fulani spam into death for your opponent. So what I need to see from KJ here is a very aggressive game 3. If he plays that turtle mode, I think we're going to see a 2-1 for Elyona.
Yeah, I feel like the big thing in game number 2 compared to game number 1 was that Elyona basically incentivized Kaiser Johan to leave his base. And that wasn't the case in game number 1. Elyona was much more aggressive when it comes to expanding economy, and that forced Kaiser Johan to move out of his base every once in a while. And in many ways, you can accomplish the same thing with the Malians here. And I think this is going to be one of the more intriguing things to look out for when we head into game number 3. Malians, if you can leverage cattle, if you can leverage the pit mines, it forces Kaiser Johan to move out potentially prematurely or risk being flooded in mid-late game.
Yeah, and the interesting thing actually about this matchup is even pre-nerf, Malians were slightly favored on the percentages, right? They were like a 51-52% win rate. So like, this isn't an impossible matchup for Malians. Like, realistically, what used to happen is you see Fast Castle and Etegege, right? Like, you know, is that was the plays. Like, I'm going to get the relics, then I'm going to snowball Camel Lancers. You're still doing that against what is going to be mass Donzo Jabs. So I hope we've got some weird water plays that play a bit different. I think Iabid's a new generation is being figured out. Let's see if they can be figured out here. Game 3 is ready. We hop into Mongolian Heights to decide who is going to head on through to that round of 16. Will it be Elyona or will it be Kaiser Johan? Old versus new civs. What we love to see.
And a classic map to play here in the open qualifiers of the Elite Classic. We're heading out to Mongolian Heights, one of the OG built-in maps of the game. One of the most popular competitive maps until custom maps were introduced. And one which has a long, long legacy in this game. KP, of course, with the river, that's the word I was looking for, with the river in between the players, of course there is opportunities to fish here for Kaiser Johan. And the other thing, something that we always need to look out for on Mongolian Heights, is sheep holes. They tend to spawn on the outer rim of the map, and it's one of the most significant maps when it comes to taking away the enemy sheep. It's just so common to see players heading to the enemy player's side and then trying to yoink away most of the sheep that spawns there.
Yeah, it's a little bit different with KJ because he has to come back home with the food soon. Because, like, you know, you need a few extra sheep. You don't drop the mill if you drop the dock. Easiest way to remember a river, by the way, like, just remember that one Justin Timberlake song. I'm not going to try to sing it, but, like, once you never forget the word after that. Which is appropriate because usually someone is left crying quite quickly on this map. The fishing factor used to be a really big deal, and Mongolian Heights used to be a very impressive map, but it's been a while since we've seen it, so we've got to dissect some of the changes. Ever since it was added back into active rotation, there's very big differences now. It used to be that you had 3 crossings on Mongolian Heights. It's now 5. On top of that, since we last saw Mongolian Heights in competitive play, shoreline fish has been nerfed for fishing boats. So although it's still a positive eco play, it's not as snowball as it once was. And that means although Elyona is going to be at a disadvantage on early food, it doesn't feel like the GG end-all that it used to be.
I'm just looking at that little weirdness in the map generation to the north, where that cliff completely surrounds a little, I guess, patch of grass. Yep, this is the one I'm looking at.
Yeah, I call that the Shinobi stop home. You know, when you're away from home and you're like, oh no, these lances are gonna kill me. Shunshin. I want more cliffs like that, man. That might be, you know what that is? We need new maps that are essentially the real buff to Coca Township, because that thing is looking abysmal offside water maps right now. Obviously, I don't think we're getting Japanese in this series. Well, final game, right? They didn't even draft it. But, you know, this play with the fishing is really good for KJ on the opening. Remember, the Iabids are the Abbasids in that form, and that they only pay 75 wood per dock, so it's a nice, cozy play. Curious to see what the tech-up choice is going to be. I'm imagining we're going to be looking at maybe the... I don't want to say Desert Raider. I guess Desert Raider's not bad because it forces a Javelin investment. But Growth Wing feels really good as well, just to get the extra villagers. Should we check on KJ? Has he started the tech up yet? Should have, yeah. So,
yep.
Oh, he went, dude, oh, okay, because this is cool. I thought he wouldn't do this because there's no contest, but basically you go Advancement Wing if you see someone else dock your area so that you can get a ship out quick enough. But this is about getting galleys out so that Elyona can't aggro him. A pretty interesting choice.
Yeah, there's more to this. Whenever you invest into an early dock in Dark Age, you often delay your Feudal Age, and you can actually catch up with the normal Feudal Age timings just by having that discount on the cost of the age up. So at the end of the day, you see that the 2 players will be pretty much neck and neck when it comes to Feudal Age timing, but one player does have a dock and the other one doesn't. So we actually see this very commonly from Iabid players using that way of aging up as a way to offset that deficit when it comes to feudal age timing.
Yes, but the key is if I'm being contested, right? And that's what kind of surprised me. I mean, it ends up being the right choice because Elyona is going for a dock drop, but this wasn't info KJ was privy to. The reason I'm not the biggest fan of it always is that there's a really strong play on this map that you now don't have, and that's logistics. This is a 6-relic map, and I think logistics is actually better in so many situations now than advancement wing. Like, ever since the nerfs, I'm still face-palming when we're still seeing a lot of fast castle advancement wing builds. This is feudal, it's very different. It does leave him open to some decent options in castle age. I think typically a lot of players right now are going for the advancement wing, the growth wing to get the 8 extra villagers, which just guarantees that your eco stays ahead. Next dot going up.
Yeah, a bit of a contest here from Elyona trying to harass that will, but it should complete, so we're going to be left with 2 docks here for Kaiser Johan. As you kind of pointed out before, we have multiple crossings now, a lot more than what we used to have. But apparently Elyona does have his own dock as well somewhere. We haven't really seen that.
Yeah, it's in the center. Yeah. Like it was scouted.
Oh, yeah, it's blue on blue. So
it's
a little difficult to see on the minimap.
He's very. Like, I hate that. These filthy blue players and their camouflage. But yeah, KJ did know about that. He scouted past it and then went further down. So he essentially has that dot pinch now. I love this approach because it means that he can just dart away to the north and the south and heal, and Elyona's stuck. So it does look like a situation where Elyona shouldn't win on water. I think at this point it's kind of moot to even try. You should probably just be focusing on your castle age timing.
Hunting Cannon, another unit that you frequently see in competitive gaming, but of course, when you want to contest the river as the Malians, that's kind of the unit that you have to go for. 2 DAOs should be able to deal with this. Nice repairs from Kaiser Johan, pulling back the DAO into the repair aura of the dock. And it does have a demo as well. Could be something that he could use to damage that dock very heavily, making it easier to finish off.
Yeah, he'll wait for the Spring ship, right? Like, you wait, Spring comes out, hit it once, dead.
Beautiful snipe on the sheep out there. Was like, even if your scout gets away, you are not going to get the sheep.
I mean, it's actually very smart. It seems like it's just petty, but the reality of this is that Elyona's going to need more food. He can't fish, right? So it actually is going to hurt him. Interestingly enough, Elyona's going to push this back. Nice little cool detail about the Malians that usually gets glazed over. Their docks have an aura that gives them extra movement speed on their boats. So they're very good at chasing. The problem is because of the way the KJ set up, you don't chase. You get chased. Demo ship comes out, looks like a return fire there. Not good enough. He needed 1 more Springald hit. Sick read by KJ to min-max and put Elyona further behind.
This is a big one here. Elyona lost his own Springald ship, but the Buglaw on the other side remains intact. And now the DAOs are moving in, ready to start that demo. Elyona, he's just losing momentum on the water. And here, Kaiser Johan could just trade this demo worst case scenario. It looks like Elyona is going to be the one trying to do that. Face off. It's going to deploy it. But in the end, gets absolutely nothing. I feel like he just wanted too much and got nothing in return.
I mean, you need double demo to get fishing birds. Like, it's just a bad play otherwise. Elyona, I mean, it's appropriate that we're on a map with fishing because right now he looks about as useful as a Magikarp. This guy is behind in every regard at this stage. It's an extra 8 eco units for his opponent. If we look on land, can you guess the grand total of ranches? I think we've got maybe 2, maybe 3.
I feel like it's deceiving because you're looking at Malians with pit mines and ranches, and this is why I was somewhat surprised about him being so heavily involved in building ships. I feel like playing classic Malians over here could have been a reasonable way of responding to this build.
Well, I think this is Elyona literally, like, I said he learned in Game 2, right? But he kind of didn't in Game 3, and what I mean by that is he still tried to be the offensive player when he probably should have been the defensive player. Like, this whole approach where he's trying to contest water doesn't play to the strength of the Malians right now. It's not the meta build. It's not Fulani like it's meant to be. Yes, you're going to be up against multiple fishing. Yes, you're going to be up against, like, the Ibis scaling quite quickly, but realistically, like, if you want to contest them, you need to be fast about it. Your dock timing needs to be optimal. It needs to try and choke your opponent out. Interesting thing, having Mansa Quarry should give you an edge because you can toggle over to stone and then get in placements, but we just didn't see any of that. Instead, we just see Elyona looking hung and dry, right? And KJ now, with this scaling into military force on land, Elyona's not even prepped for that.
Yeah, Elyona's got nothing out there right now, and I feel like he's going to be caught in a very bad position because right now he's building up these cattle ranches. He's going to have a juggernaut economy in like 3, 4, 5-ish minutes. But until then, he's got no standing army. And even a couple of javelin throwers won't be enough when he's facing a combined army of horsemen and archers. Kaiser Johan is going to have to be cautious because he doesn't want to just lose the archers to the jav throwers. But at this point, with the river control plus the horsemen coming in, if he's just cautious taking fights and chips away at the enemy eco, I think he's going to be at a great position.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of feels like it's cruise mode right now. The fact that Elyona is going jabs with horsemen already coming, this is tough, man. Also, the spread, the second pit mine being so far to the left side, easy raid point. If you try to contest that, you're in trouble. And that is the worst possible thing I could see you doing in Feudal Age right now. Sofas. Where's the food coming from? Like,
Oh
how
my
do you
lord.
afford this?
I feel like he's just playing a very reactive game right now. Sure enough, Sofas will deal with both of these troops, but it's an extremely expensive unit for a player that doesn't have a fascinating eco, I would say. 400 food per minute for Sofa production is very underwhelming.
No, I think you'll find that their eco is very fascinating. It's very fascinating that they're making this choice at all. It's a tough one right now. I mean, there's a small window of opportunity in that KJ doesn't have an incredible amount of food coming from the fishing yet, but we know that's going to keep scaling, right? And that puts the pressure on you to hit with these sofas. And, you know, you build sofas against a civ that has phalanx, right? So worst case scenario, they resort to spearmen to defend. And considering they've also got these ships now patrolling the crossings, if your idea is defend and then raid, how are you getting in freely?
And you have to consider that Elyona does have just one safe gold mine to work with. That battering ram that's being built right now by Kaiser Johan, it's going to contest this one pit mine, and 3 sofas and 4 javelin throwers won't be enough to hold against horsemen, archers, and probably soon to be spearmen as well.
Yeah, and remember, these are not your imported armor sofas. These are actually pretty pathetic. They are terrible units in terms of cost efficiency. Elyona can kind of afford it because they have got a lot of ranches right now, but you know, realistically, what I'm seeing is a very weak point coming. Like, look at the military forces on both sides. If you invest 1,800 resources into a tech up while your opponent is going all in, you're going to die. You're already seeing the ram approaching the base, and funnily enough, even though they've got sofas, they don't have enough to easily contest this.
Yeah. Sofas get a massive power spike once they get into costlays, but before that, they are not astonishing unless you have good numbers of them, and that's definitely not the case here for Elyona. In fact, he's got his sofa split in between the two sides of the map. First scout ranch is going to get taken out here by the battering ram, and I think the cattle is going to get killed as well, just to make sure that you can't place a new one right there.
This is atrocious right now. Like, KJ, he's getting everything he needs. Horsemen taking out the javelins, and Elyona, this is a misplay. They're actually attacking the horsemen instead of the archers. Remember, sofas get bonus damage up against infantry and are better at resolving that issue. I think you just have to kind of accept that you have to kite away with your jabs, and you're going to have to lead the sofas to trade. Instead, it just feels like on a defensive side of things, Elyona didn't get as much out of that as they should have. Raids on the other side are at least nice. They dent the backside. They find 1 or 2 eco kills. But we're now seeing a mass spearman transition. We're seeing archer upgrades coming in. And Elyona now with just a little bit of damage to that ranch escalation. And the fact they continue to invest in sofas. I'm starting to wonder how they ever get to Castle Age.
Oh, he did lose the pit mine as well. He couldn't save it in time. On the other side, you gotta credit Elyona for the use of the sofas. He actually killed 5 villagers, make it 6. Response was a little sluggish here from Kaiser Johan, so these sofas definitely got some good value going. But at the end of the day, Elyona lost a lot of troops back at home as well. He lost his initial pit mine, and now his gold miners are being harassed on this other pit mine here. You still feel like Kaiser Johan has so much momentum over here going for him.
I do feel a little bit bad for him for this detail, though. Imagine you build a Desert Raider, you're like, yes, unease. You're against Javelins. One of the unfortunate things about Desert Raiders is they carry the range tag. If he can actually micro it correctly and keep the jabs away, that's going to be a sick counter to the sofas. But I think for it to work, KJ is probably going to have at least 3 Desert Raiders, which doesn't feel great. But, I mean, in fairness, Desert Raiders do handle sofas quite well. So if he scales it, I actually don't mind it. I think it can work. It's just, the reality is it's a very expensive unit to add to your composition. It's the same thing with Camel Archers and why we don't see them that much.
Yeah, Kaiser Johan is playing a very different game compared to game number 1 and 2. He's a lot more aggressive, and I think in this position, that's exactly what he needs to do. Booming with this game is just not going to be what makes this a win. But now he feels like there is blood in the water, and he's able to push into the enemy base once again, ready to take out some of these ranches.
This timing again, just as he's setting up the ranches, once more they go down. And this time is going to take even more away. Cal also being dented. Where's the army right now? I mean, Elyona, he's completely outmassed and outgunned, right? I think he sent some to raid. Everything has to come back to defend. And still, even though he will be able to eventually push this away, it's stopping him from scaling his army. These ranches are everything.
That's Elyona's win condition, being able to scale up that food eco and mass produce the sofas. But that scale up is just way too slow. He is losing villagers now on the gold mine as well. Both the food and the gold is being hit at the same time, and that just completely shatters his ability to build up the sofa numbers.
Sick pinch there. Free surface go down, and all of a sudden the horseman and spear chase in. Remember, spears actually aren't that bad against jabs. No bonus damage going that way, right? And considering you pay so much more for javelins, it's an ugly trade. Behind this, by the way, KJ's math going up. We're going to be seeing Castle soon. This is crazy. I mean, the way he's played this, like you said, really well played. I want to see KJ do something different. He delivered. This is his most aggressive game of the entire series, exactly what he needed. Now, with this army being cleared up, I wouldn't be surprised if Elyona calls GG. He might delude himself into thinking he's still got a way back into this game, but Castle's about to be queued up, and once that ticks in, this is over.
Yeah, this is going to be a cleanup here for Elyona, but it doesn't matter because indeed Castle Age was about to be on the way for the opposing player. And there was just too much pressure on both the food and the gold eco here from Kaiser Johan. What a lovely series here, KP. Neck and neck, as you predicted at the beginning of this one. But in the end, Kaiser Johan comes away with this one. 2-1 is the final score. Elyona is going to have to try tomorrow to get a chance to qualify to Elite Classic 2.
Yeah, what an interesting series, right? Game one, we had this attack-defend mentality that favored KJ. Elyona said, I'm not falling for that again in game number two. He learned from his mistakes. He baited KJ into that latest stage where he didn't know how to close the game from an aggressive standpoint in Castle Age. And then we go back again in the third game, where now, once again, like, it's going to be attacker, bait, defender, but the other way around. I love KJ's approach to this game. Really seemed to catch Elyona off guard, and the moment the fissure was going on, I think the mistake here for me from Elyona was not sticking to his guns. You know, he wanted these ranches, he wanted this clear goal. Those dock sneaks, I think, cost him dearly. Even trying to encourage or invite the idea of playing one dock versus two felt like a losing play, and KJ took full advantage of that. He'll continue through to the round of 16. And, you know, Kaiser Johan's a very capable player. I mean, a very talented player. You know, he has, I think, like, he's had 3 accounts in the top, like, 150, 200. I think he has the Kaiser Johan account. He had the Roger Scruton account, which I think got up to like 30th. His main on this account right now is ranked 60th. And then he has another account. I think he has like the KJ account that's like 120. So really talented player. I love the fact that even though we lost sort of, he's gone back to StarCraft. We've got all the replacement suites, right? We've got Kaiser Johan doing really well. Numidan is another amazing one. Baltun as well. I mean, there's just so many upcoming Swedes. Love to see the representation there.